I could feel very high.
It's a new day, but not on the Enterprise. We're in the timey-wimey room, and Suliban is talking to Mystery Time Lad. The latter is so displeased with how things went down in the pilot episode that he's punishing Suliban by removing one of his genetic add-ons, but promises to return it if he's a good boy this time. To the Enterprise we go, where a crewman serving Archer's breakfast, one given the name Daniels to tell us he's important, asks where we're heading today. The answer is some special space fog we've detected a few ships in, so we're off to make friends. Possibly. The introduction goes well enough, and Captain Fraddock here says he's basically a bus driver paid to ferry some people into the cloud. His passengers hired him for transport so they could see one of the baby stars here fart out some neutrons. This, apparently, is something that happens on a set schedule and holds religious significance for them, though Fraddock considers it just another job. Maybe that's why he agrees to pass on Archer's invitation to his guests, as that means Fraddock won't have to put up with them. The pilgrims pop over to Enterprise for a little cultural exchange, and they've brought gifts. A spread in the mess hall gives everybody a chance to mingle and chat, and one of the pilgrims explains this particular patch of space fog is where the universe started, according to their religion. Not everybody's delighted by having guests, and Reed doesn't care for the idea of them being shown critical areas of the ship, but that doesn't stop them getting a tour of engineering. As Tucker chats away with them, some of them having a technical leaning themselves, one of the group becomes separated from the others. The explorer opens a panel and starts fiddling, with his hand extending and twisting in a manner very reminiscent of what Suliban can do. Disconnecting a cable was the goal, it seems, and he rejoins the group after closing the hatch. If that wasn't dodgy enough, Captain Fraddock gives us a call to make sure we know about the storm brewing in the space fog. We tried to give it a wide berth, but even being on the edge is a little rough. Things get worse when we're hit by lightning, something that risks overloading our warp reactor and kabooming the whole ship, says Tucker. A handful of kabooms in engineering result in the lights coming back on and everything returning to normal. Archer congratulates Tucker on managing to solve the problem, only to be told it wasn't him. Something just saved the ship, but it certainly wasn't our chief engineer. Our pilgrim guests are nipping back to their transport ship, which is an understandable reaction to nearly doing a dead because of our tech. They've taken it well enough, though, and are open to the idea of coming back tomorrow for the big event. They're also letting Phlox spend the night with them, him having an interest in religious practices. With them gone, we pop to engineering, where Tucker explains why the ship didn't get turned into a debris field. A disconnected cable was the reason we didn't overload and kaboom, and it's the one our mystery guest unplugged during the tour. Tucker doesn't know about that, though, and tells Archer it wasn't any of his engineers. Our guests were the only other possibilities, but Captain Fraddock says they all deny it, and have no reason to lie given the positive outcome. It's a puzzler, and so is Daniels from Archer's breakfast insisting on speaking with him. Archer tries to brush it off until he's told it's about the Suliban, and more specifically, the time that Archer had a Barney with Suliban. That gets him interested enough to go back to the guy's quarters, where he asks Archer if Suliban told him about the time fuckery war. And with that particular cat out of the bag, we can now officially declare that Daniels has been adopted by a patron of the channel, and will henceforth be known as the Time Pervert Daniels, by order of Admiral Cam McGinn. Archer's obviously very curious by this point, not least of which because the Time Pervert Daniels has said he's not Starfleet. He's a member of a group that stops people dicking with time, and it's understandable Archer hasn't heard about them because the group hasn't been formed yet. Daniels pulls out a bit of tech that projects a timeline. He points out that he started about a millennium from now, and the future guy who Suliban is taking orders from exists a few hundred years before that. See, not everybody is following the rules that were set down when people with time tech realized shit could go very badly indeed if they arsed it up. Research is fine, but interference, such as trying to start a Klingon civil war, for example, is very much considered a no-no. Just such interference happened today, in fact. Somebody disconnected a cable in engineering, Suliban himself to be specific, which isn't how history was supposed to go down, so he needs to be stopped. All of which puts Archer in the position of being asked to capture the guy who just saved his ship based on the word of a waiter who says he's a time-travelling Rosa from the year 3000. In a shocking show of good sense, Archer's not just going to accept what he's been told by the time pervert Daniels at face value. He's discussing the matter with T'Pol and Tucker, as if we're going to help track down Suliban, they'll need telling about it anyway. T'Pol urges extreme caution, and Tucker says what Archer saw could have been something like the holograms he experienced a few episodes back. Archer listens to their sage advice and then decides to ignore it. Some of those pilgrims are coming back here to watch their baby star do a religious fart, and as one of them may be Suliban, Archer thinks we can't afford to risk ignoring what he's been told. Phlox is back with the pilgrims who want to watch the event from our mess hall, but he's not able to give any useful data when Archer asks if any of them seemed a bit off. As the time pervert Daniels is hooking up some gubbins in engineering and showing off a fancy walk-through-walls toy to repair something, Archer's feeding his dog. Porthos, dog in space, is more interested in growling than his food, and Archer figures out the possible reason why, then moves to call for security. He's warned by Suliban that doing so would be unwise, not least of which because he's not the bad guy here, as proven by saving the ship. Suliban knows there's someone here to find him as he detected time wibblies. More than that, he says it's in Archer's own best interest to tell him who it is. Whoever came here probably said he was a time rozzer trying to prevent alterations or some shit, when in reality that person is the one who attempted to kaboom the Enterprise. Archer asks why Suliban prevented it, which is a fair question given the whole attempted murder thing in the pilot episode. His answer is that he was instructed to save the Enterprise by whoever's pulling the strings. He just does what he's told. They're interrupted by a call from T'Pol to say the time pervert Daniels has finished with his fiddling and wants to get on with it. Obviously, this tells Suliban all he wants to know, and off he goes to find the lad after pooping yellow at Archer. The special future tech scanner is up and working, just in time to detect a Suliban life sign very near. Tucker spots an outline and Daniels orders everybody out of the room. T'Pol and Tucker are watching from the door as Suliban poops yellow at the time pervert Daniels, and time kabooms him. Rather than do anything about Suliban, they try to call Archer, and when receiving no response, go to find him in his quarters with Phlox. Some wake-up juice does the job, and we confirm with Captain Fraddock that none of his passengers have just returned, which means Suliban is still here. A call to Reed locks everything down, and as Tucker goes to try and scan for Suliban, Archer looks for the gizmo Daniels was using. It's already gone, and Archer assumes Suliban has nicked it for intel in the time fuckery war. That might also explain why we just detected an encrypted call. Tucker can't understand the future tech, but he can tell when Suliban tries to bypass our security and nick a shuttle. Reed meets Archer near where the fiddling was detected, but it's behind walls. Not to worry, as Archer's got the special walk-through-walls toy, and in he goes. Suliban is a little surprised to see him, but some shaky from the baby starfart is enough of a distraction for him to start a fight. Suliban loses his gun, and Archer's able to keep hold of his own, but Suliban scarpers through a hatch. Looks like the encrypted call was to a tiny Suliban ship, as Travis says one just turned up. That'll be why Suliban is in the shuttle bay and trying to scarper when Archer catches him up. Rather than stun Suliban, he instead shoots the gizmo that the time pervert Daniels had. Seems like a bloody awful idea to me, not least of which because Suliban opening a hatch leaves Archer flailing around and dropping the walk-through-walls gizmo to boot. Suliban dives through the open bay door and legs it, leaving Archer to crawl to safety. Perhaps him feeling like a complete and utter tit is why he tells T'Pol to not bother pursuing when the Suliban ship buggers off. Our pilgrim guests are gone, and Captain Fraddock with them, though we're still up on the deal thanks to those gifts. Explaining all of this to Starfleet can wait, as can any other future tech that the time pervert Daniels had in his quarters, so we'll leave them to seal it up Raiders of the Lost Ark style as we get ready to take another step on the long road. The Suliban are back, and this time it's not even slightly personal. Despite their previous ding-dong and attempt to make Archer do a dead, Suliban comes to the rescue today. Well, maybe. We don't actually know if that's the case. When you pare everything back and look at the pure data, all we know for certain is that the Enterprise was prevented from kabooming by an action he took. The list of what we don't know is far longer. We don't know for certain if saving the ship was the intended goal of Suliban. He and the time pervert Daniels seem to confirm as much, but neither of them are particularly trustworthy sources. We don't know if the cause of the overload was accidental or deliberate. That it was a bolt of lightning seems to confirm it was random, but we also had a line about the storm heading towards us, which is a handy coincidence. We don't know if either of the factions we've met in this little temporal tug-of-war are acting in anybody's interest beyond their own. Previous events seem to confirm Suliban and Mystery Time Guy are dodgy, but we don't know anything about that situation beyond what we were told by people we just met. Maybe Suliban was trying to restart a Klingon civil war that another time faction had stopped. If you want to get really into it, we don't actually know if any of this is timey-wimey bollocks in the first place. Conversations between Suliban and Mystery Time Guy seem to confirm as much, but who's to say that Mystery Time Guy isn't really just Mystery lying through his bloody teeth guy? All we've seen for certain is advanced tech, and that's nothing new for alien species. All of this taken together is the main issue with today's episode when viewed on its own merits. There's nothing wrong with leaving questions unanswered, and I've repeated multiple times that it's always the preferred choice to an unsatisfying answer. The problem is when you're left with nothing but questions. There's no hook here beyond the Enterprise getting caught up in shit it doesn't understand, muddling through while still not understanding it, and having it finish without any sort of payoff. You don't have to answer everything, but a story without a conclusion isn't a fucking story, it's a prologue. This episode simply does not stand on its own feet. If the show was heavily serialized, that would be an acceptable part of the structure, but this is the first time we've revisited the idea in nearly a dozen episodes. If you consider that in terms of weekly broadcasts, as things were when this show got made, that's over 2 sodding months ago. If you're going to have a long burn over those sorts of timeframes, you need to make sure that each individual episode sticks the landing. To use the same metaphor, this one ends while it's still in the air. While I'm firmly engaged in negative mode, we should probably talk about those poorly contrived reasons for Archer to lose 2 future tech gizmos at the end of the episode. The knockoff Harry Seldon Prime Radiant timeline gadget that Suliban was trying to nick gets shot for no real reason, though I suppose we could generously say that Archer was more convinced of his gun working on that than Suliban himself. This is not a particularly likely conclusion when we've already seen Suliban be taken down by our weapons, or when he doesn't know what materials tech from 900 years in the future will be made of, but I did say we were being generous. Failing to retrieve the walk-through walls toy, on the other hand, makes no real sense at all, though. Even if you forget we've got scanners and a teleporter, there's no reason we couldn't have stayed a while to find and retrieve it manually. This is also after the baby starfart, you'll recall, so the area would have been calmer. You could argue losing them was a necessity, a way of removing future tech from Archer's hands, but the episode itself points out that's already flawed. We still have a future tech scanner hooked up in engineering, and who knows what else in the quarters of the time pervert Daniels. What's more, the episode already gives us an answer to that tech by having the room be sealed at the end. If we'd instead seen Archer put the other future tech gizmos in there before sealing it up, we'd have reinforced the message of not wanting to bollocks up their timeline. A little line from Archer admitting such things are way above his pay grade would also have been a nice nod to learning from T'Pol's cautious attitude. Instead, we get 2 gizmos that are lost for no real reason when a far more satisfying answer already existed within the script. Okay, I'm done being negative, so let's finish this one by pointing out something I rather liked. When we first meet our pilgrims as they come aboard, this guy here gives a blessing of sorts.
May Agasaria embrace you into his cycle of renewal?
Thanks.
When I saw this, it occurred to me that it was notable because it didn't stick out. When religion is shown in fantasy or sci-fi, it often makes the error of being overblown, grandiose, pompous. In contrast, this guy plays it perfectly. No loud proclamations demanding your attention or pantomime show. He gives a respectful but rote recitation with an efficient little hand motion. I could absolutely believe that he's done this 1,000 times before, that it's as normal to him as saying thank you, which is where others get it wrong by laying it on thick. It may be the first time that we viewers have seen it, but it should be old news to anybody who's actually giving it. His little performance is utterly unremarkable, and that's what sells it. I've said before that I'm partial to little details, and this is a great example of that. Some points to whoever decided to play it that way. End of episode.
We're all sorted now then, are we? Only I note the smoke's gone again.
Yeah, the funeral's over and they all think they're having a party with Ewoks.
No, that must be why Phlox were dressed up in a fursuit, to study their behaviour.
No, I'm pretty sure that's unconnected, but they're all busy and that's what matters.
Fine, so after all of that, we've learned that a forced mutiny probably isn't the way to go.
Not if we want the ship in one piece afterwards, no.
We'll have to start recruiting people then. We can't rely on Phlox and one lower decker.
I suggest we should probably start with the armory guy, Reed.
Fair logic with him holding the guns, but what makes you think he'd be receptive?
I've been flicking through old sci-fi shows, and he fits the pattern of being deceitful.
Why'd you say that?
Because he's got a British accent. Woof.